Hey everybody, Dave Hagen here. This is the first show of the new year, so of course we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions. That's today on the Financial Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. Here is your host, financial problem solver and talk show host, Dave Hagen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, coming to you from beautiful downtown Van Nuys. This is the first show of the new year, and welcome to Mr. Brian Reed.
Happy New Year, David.
Happy New Year to you, too. Did you have any fun over the New Year's?
I don't remember.
Well, that means you must have had a good time.
No, I'm totally kidding. It was fine.
And one of the favorite comments that I heard was from a member of the Eagles, and he I forget which guy it was, but he was the guitar player, and he had a pretty powerful, wild time when he was playing with the Eagles. And he was being interviewed on one of the night shows, and he says, I'm told I had a very good time in the 70s and 80s. So New Year's was good, huh?
No, it was nice. It was just a simple dinner, watched the ball drop, and I think I was in bed by 12:45.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes. But, maybe a little time for reflection. How about you?
Yeah, no, I do love New Year's for that. It's not, changes can happen at any point in time in the year. But there's nothing wrong with focusing on the flip of the calendar and going, all right, is there something particular about, the calendar flip that inspires you to have thoughts for the upcoming year?
No, absolutely. And I enjoy having a little bit of time to reflect and think about and kind of plan out the new year as well. So, I was thinking about putting together this episode and talking about New Year's and New Year's resolutions and, why I don't like resolutions and I do like goals and that kind of stuff. And I was listening to a show that we did last year, and I thought, you know what, damn, that's pretty good. So we're going to play some clips. Let's cue it up. This is Dave Hagen coming to you with the Financial Wellness Podcast. It's the first week of the new year, and we're coming to you from Uncle Studios in beautiful downtown Van Nuys. Now, in our last episode, I was talking about spending some time to talk about what went well and what didn't go as well last year. I hope that you've had an opportunity to do that. We stopped the show a little bit early so that you could spend some time. Hope that you wrote a couple of those things down. A couple of things. First, it'll give you some perspective on last year and really get you ready for this year. We got a lot to do this year. So it'll give you an opportunity to do that. Also, I think if you look at the things that you wrote that went well or not well, the things that you put on the top of those two lists are those things that typically tend to be a little more important to you. So look at that. Take a look at that. Think about that. And there's nothing particular that we're going to do with those two lists. I think that it's important just to look at them and reflect a little bit, give you some perspective, really, for the stuff that we want to do this year. One more little bit of housekeeping. Brian Reed's taken the week off. So this week it's just you, the listener, and me talking about financial wellness and how we start to put together a plan for this next year. So again, we're recording this podcast the first week in January, and it's a time when we all talk about New Year's resolutions. And making resolutions or setting goals can really be done, if you think about it, almost any time of the year. I mean, you can choose to turn a page in your life at almost any time. But it just seems like January is such a good or appropriate time to think about the topic. What resolutions did you make? Making New Year's resolutions is a time-honored tradition apparently all over the world. As humans, we always hope for a better future, especially when the year that we're leaving behind might have been maybe a little tough. But I hate New Year's resolutions, and I know what you're thinking. Why? Well, first, they're not usually made with a lot of advanced thought. Usually they're done at a party, when you're going to a party, you're talking to a friend. It's quick and off the top of your head, and you're talking about, well, I want to lose 50 pounds, or well, that's a lot of weight. I want to lose 15 pounds, or I want to save some money, or I want to buy a new car, or I want to move to Timbuktu. I don't know, whatever those goals might be. But they're not made with a lot of thought, and I think that they're done quickly, and I think that's a wasted opportunity. Secondly, I don't think that New Year's resolutions are usually part of or get integrated into our overall life plan. Yeah, I do want to lose some weight, but how does that fit into any of my longer views of my life? You see what I mean? It appears kind of short-sighted to me, at least when I've done it in the past. Third, so many times they seem so typical or trite. So many of them are the same. I've got a list here today that are the top 10 resolutions that people made, and a lot of them are going to sound awful familiar to you. They sound an awful lot of familiar to me when I was looking at them preparing for the podcast. So, I don't like particularly New Year's resolutions. So now you're thinking, okay, Dave, you're about putting together a plan. You're about pursuing a purposeful path. That's one of the tenets of the Financial Wellness Podcast. What do you like? I like goals. I think that that's a different way to look at it. It's more integrated. It's more purposeful. It fits into your overall life plan. And I like goals. And we're going to talk about goals next week. So stay tuned. So I'm preparing for today's podcast, and I come across an article in Inc. magazine from just last week, and it reported about a recent survey that was done among 2,000 people about their New Year's resolutions. So I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Let's talk about this. So here you have it, the top 10 New Year's resolutions according to a survey done among 2,000 people, as reported in Inc. magazine. The number one most popular New Year's resolution: diet or eat healthier. 71% of the people responded that was one of their resolutions. Now that sounds like me for sure, right? How about you? Think about it. Almost everybody says that. Now that means we're either very health conscious or we all eat a lot of crud, but that was the number one response. Number two, exercise more. 65% of the people responded that this was one of their resolutions. Again, that sounds like me for sure. Everyone wants to exercise a little bit more, but how about you? Does this sound familiar? Number three, lose weight. 54% of the people responded that this was one of their resolutions. Now again, for me, every year I want to lose 10 or 15 pounds. How about you? Is this stuff starting to sound a little familiar? Number four, save more and spend less. 32%. Only 32% responded that one of their resolutions was to save more and spend less. Now, finally, we've got a financial goal, and we've got a goal that relates to the podcast. It also might relate to something that might be considered a little more long-term. Not that good health isn't necessarily long-term, but we're talking about financial long-term. The sad part about it was only 1 out of 3 people that responded that save more and spend less was one of their resolutions. Number 5, learn a new skill or hobby. 26% of the people responded this was one of their New Year's resolutions. I think that that's great. I think that it's important, but it's kind of shallow, right? Learn a new skill or a hobby. Someone that's just bored, or maybe someone that wants to expand their life experience a bit. But it sounds a little shallow to me. It's kind of a missed opportunity. Number 6, quit smoking. This is obvious, but only 21% of the people responded that this was one of their resolutions. Now, this isn't my issue. Never smoke, never will, but I'm kind of surprised that it was brought up, and it's also kind of makes me start thinking about what's this deal with Juul, this new thing, Juul. People are still vaping this stuff, and it's got nicotine in it. I don't understand why that's necessarily that much better, but that's a discussion for another time. Number 7, read more. 17%. Only 17% responded that it was a goal to read more. Now, I think that this is really a pretty good goal. I'm a little disappointed that only 17% of the people responded that it was something that they were thinking about. But we've talked about this already several podcasts ago. Spending time to every day to read, what would we say, an hour a day, the 5-hour rule. Spending time thinking about, reading or studying or investing in your own mind. Number 8, find another job. 16% of the people responded that find another job was one of their resolutions. Now, I've already got a job. I've already got a couple of jobs, but this is what a lot of people out there are thinking about. And we've talked about this a little bit in past podcasts, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the future in terms of what we have come to expect from our jobs or our careers or our professions. I think that's a very interesting podcast topic. A little disappointed that only 16% of the respondents said this was something that they were thinking about. Number 9, drink less alcohol, 15%. Well, I mean, this sounds good. Maybe it should also say smoke a little less weed in light of the fact that weed is now legal in so many states. Not really my issue, but, how about you? I think we all acknowledge that it'd be a good thing to drink a little less alcohol or maybe smoke a little bit less weed. Number 10, spend more time with family and friends. Only 13%, everybody. 13% of the people responded. Now, I think this is a really good goal, not a goal, resolution, because these are resolutions. But perhaps it's maybe just part of a larger call to be a better member or a friend. It seems to me that's what the goal should be. So you see what I mean? If you look at the resolutions that most people are thinking about, including me, maybe including you, they seem a little odd because they seem self-centered or a little bit shallow. And you look at many of them, they relate to eating better or being more attractive, and a lot of them don't seem to fit into one's overall life plan. And for that reason, I think that this group of resolutions mostly missed the mark. Here's a few more interesting things about these New Year's resolutions. According to Inc. magazine, about 60% of us admit that we make New Year's resolutions. Well, I mean, I do. I hope you do, although we're going to do it a little bit differently maybe from here forward. But only about 8% of us are successful in achieving them, according to this survey. Women tend to make more health-focused resolutions, while men tend to pledge to find a new job or lay off the alcohol. That's kind of an interesting comment, men and women. Saving money is one of the top 5 New Year's resolutions and is also in the top 5 for those that most commonly failed. Now, I'm really happy it's in the top 5, but remember we said it was only 1 in 3. And it's also one of the top 5 that are commonly failed. But isn't that what we're about? Getting together to talk every week to keep us on that path, to make sure that we kind of make a point to hit this particular goal, not resolution, but goal. Perhaps more importantly, or sadly perhaps, over half of the respondents said that they fail their resolutions before January 31st, within a month. Within 8% of the year gone, they're already failed on their resolutions. Now, why do we fail so often and so quickly with these New Year's resolutions? Well, I think it's because they're not formulated properly and they're not integrated into our life plan to begin with. It's almost a recipe to fail. So how do we make these resolutions more real and integrate them into our life plan? I mean, that would be the key. That would be the secret sauce, if you will, to making these work. Well, I think that most importantly, we need to begin with the end in mind. Now, I hope you've heard that phrase before, but maybe you haven't. This isn't a phrase that I came up with. It's something that Stephen Covey talked about at length in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. His thought was that whenever you begin a new year, month, or even a day, for example, you should first understand what the end product should look like. Then you can put in place resolutions or goals on how to get there. Again, whether you're starting a year, a month, or even a day, think about what the end result should be. Now, where do we want to end up? Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about starting with the end in mind? Well, frankly, I hadn't, not until I read Stephen Covey's book some years ago. What, you haven't read his book, you're saying? Well, it's available in any bookstore, and it's available online through Amazon and the other outlets. It's one of the most important books I think you could read as you go through life. Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, Covey suggests this exercise. Imagine what people would say about you at your funeral. Now, I know this sounds kind of morbid or macabre or sad, but it's actually a really good exercise. When you're gone, what do you want people to remember about you? Were you a good leader? Were you a kind family member or friend? Did you handle money wisely and leave behind a legacy of charity? Or did you lose 15 pounds in 2019? See what I mean? Now, don't get me wrong. I think a great and valid element of a eulogy would be that you enjoyed your life. I love it when I hear that people live life to the fullest, or that they loved all the experiences that they had in their life. And people talk about these types of events. I remember I went to a funeral a few years ago, and this fella got up and he talked about when he and the deceased were driving up in the Sierra Mountains, and the road was getting ready to close, and snow was coming down everywhere and bursting out like fireworks. And he said to the deceased, he says, "Should we keep driving?" Because there was going to be an element of danger. And the deceased looked at him and said, "Hell yeah." Now, I love someone just embracing life and loving all of the things that go along with it, and the adventure and the beauty of the world. I think that that's amazing. It's just that I don't see some of these very short-term resolutions even fitting within that overall goal. Now, turning the page and setting goals is too important of an opportunity to waste on last-minute thoughts and non-integrated plans. Kind of a wasted opportunity, if you ask me. What I would suggest is that you do 2 versions of the tombstone exercise. People call it the tombstone exercise. Some people call it the eulogy exercise. But what I would suggest is that you imagine a eulogy done about you right now. Or even imagine what someone might put on your tombstone if you passed right now. What would that look like? And write down 3 to 5 things. Just sketch down a piece of paper. Simple. Doesn't have to be complicated. Now do the same exercise for when you would pass away at the end of your life. What would that eulogy or tombstone look like? Would it be different from the first one? I'll bet that it would. Now, it seems to me that getting from one eulogy to the other is how you go about setting your goals every year. Now, some of your goals might be, I want to lose some weight. I want to eat better. I want to stop smoking. And maybe that's part of it. But how does that fit into any long-term resolutions, long-term goals that you might have? It seems to me it should be a more broader, holistic, thought-out set of resolutions or goals. How do you get from the current eulogy to the final eulogy? Think about it. Now, I want to encourage each and every one of you in the next few days to sit down in a quiet place by yourself and write 2 eulogies. You can go for a walk. You can sit in a restaurant. You can go sit in a closet. Wherever someone won't interrupt you. What do you learn by comparing these 2 eulogies? Are you on track? Do you need to think about the 2 eulogies more? And what do you need to do to get yourself to that second eulogy? Now make a point, like I said, to write it down. Something easy, something simple. I was reading something in a magazine the other day about Richard Branson. And, he's one of these world famous industrials, a highly successful person. And they were talking to him about his goal setting practice. And he said that he writes a few of his goals down every year. Why? Because when he writes them down, they seem to be more real. They seem to get done when they're written down. Now, we're going to talk a lot about goals next time. But for now, this next week, think about what the two eulogies might be. Think about how you might get from one to the other, and then we'll circle back next week. Here's to a new year filled with much success and happiness. This is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. As an additional bonus, each month, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications. Let's listen in now as Dave answers some emails.
All right, I've got an email here from Sarah, and she writes, "Dear Dave, now that I'm listening to the podcast, I find myself writing down little notes and reflections about my financial wellness. You've also got me writing things down about goals and thoughts and reflections. Where do you keep this information?" Well, Sarah, and there's a lot of places. I do the same thing. I try to practice what I preach. I try to eat what I cook, and I put notes down in a couple of places. Most people just write it down on a piece of paper in a little journal, someplace that then you can stick it and you know where it'll be. But make sure you put it in a place where no one's going to get a hold of it and read it. You don't want kids reading it, or you don't want parents reading it, or whatever it is. This is your personal, private stuff, and that's what I tend to do. But I tend to be a little more old school about that. There's something in me that appreciates taking a pen and a piece of paper and writing down a few things. Now, I don't write out a whole journal. I don't write out a whole lot of stuff. I write out bullet points, because I can remember stuff off of bullet points, but people will do things different ways at different times. But that's what I do, and I make sure I keep track of that, and again, put it in a place where nobody's going to find it, but certainly in a place where I will always be able to find it. I've had an experience before where you're going around the house going, where did I put my private notes? I put it in a really safe place, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's so safe, Dave, that not even you can find it. But find a good place. Another thing that you could do is, you could send yourself emails, or you could, use the memo capability in your iPhone or your iPad. You could use some things like that. The problem is, while those can be locked down, they're now off-site. And people might be able to get in and look at those, or if you forget to lock them down when you put your device down, someone could pick it up and look at that. And, this isn't like super secret stuff. I mean, you're not admitting to crimes or talking about things of a sexual nature, but it is private, and you don't want someone to pick it up or get to see that. Something that I've thought about lately, and one of the ways that we're producing the podcast is using Google Docs. That's really pretty amazing. You can put down there who you want to share it with. You can lock it down. You can password it. It's in the cloud, and yes, Big Brother Google does have access to that. But unless you're president of a large free country, I don't think that people are going to care too much, at least electronically, about what your goals or your notes or whatever might be, especially if you're just talking about bullet points. So those are a couple of ways. Google Docs is great, and something on your phone is great if you lock it down. I like just old-fashioned pieces of paper and and like a little journal book or something like that. In fact, my wife and I, when we go on vacation, we usually take the pieces of paper along, and we'll pull that out and say, hey, how are we doing on our goals? How are we doing on our thought process? And we can look back over many, many years because we keep it all together, and it's usually surprising and gratifying how often we're able to meet those goals, although our goals aren't usually always, hey, I want to make $1 million a year. We try and pick things that are more realistic and something that we can actually achieve as well. So a couple thoughts. I hope that helps. Wow, Brian, have I evolved in the last year? Last year I was saying write it down on paper. And this year, my big thing is put it into your
phone.
I mean, that's one of my themes that I want to to have this coming year is less paper and more stuff stored, either up in Google Docs or on the phone. And how things have changed in a year. I mean, we're going to talk about all sorts of ways to do things on your phone or electronically, and moving away from paper in just a year. Things have changed.
Better for the environment.
Well,
it's a little scary at the same time, though, too. I mean, we're always still going to be printing some stuff out or writing certain things down. But, I'm trying to go all paperless as much as I can, receipts, bills, all of that stuff. And you think back to, not dating ourselves here, but, when you got your monthly credit card bill
Sure.
or phone bill, stuff like that. Now it's payments online and no paper. And
yeah, I still think paper. I think better on paper.
Better with paper.
It kind of, I'm just maybe old school that way. But if there's stuff that I want to save, and it's not so much to save the paper, at least for me, that's a nice byproduct. It's having it accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the car. They say, oh, you got an electric car, you like to save the environment. No, I just like to go damn fast. That's my ulterior motive. But if I'm hanging out with a bunch of folks that I know are on a certain side of the political aisle, I go, oh yeah,
it's about it's
all about the environment. Forget me, So anyway, well that. That's some excerpts from a show last year talking about resolutions and how I don't like them and how I like goals better, and some tips and thoughts, and even an email from a listener. I think that gives us plenty to think about this week. And next week we're going to move on to actually setting some goals. So get ready. We're going to hit that next week. This is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Remember, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications, or share the podcast via the app with your family and friends. This is your announcer, Nick Appel, wishing you every financial success.